I had no idea of spiritual things. I was totally without Christ, didn't know him. So I worked, but I was not satisfied. I wanted something different, but I didn't know what I wanted. Someone mentioned the military. So I went to the recruiting office and I was inducted into the Air Force. But during that time, I had almost no Christian affiliation whatsoever. It was after that time that my Christian appetite came to my thinking.
I was raised in church, knew that Jesus is the Savior, knew that I had to get saved if I was going to go to heaven, but I didn't know how. When I was 11, almost 12 years old, we were in an evangelistic service in the church. I was sitting across the aisle from a unsaved man. Someone came to him and asked him, wouldn't you like to get saved? I saw him shake his head, no. And I started crying. Why? Why would he reject? When it was obvious that I was under conviction, or they thought I was under conviction, someone came to talk to me. So that night, I, with my parents, in the living room by the fireplace, we knelt together and I asked the Lord to save me.
When I finished tech school, they asked me, where would you like to go? We have two choices, one to North Dakota or one to Japan. I thought, I'd like to see a little bit more of the world. So I said, how about Japan? But then when I got to Japan, I was assigned to a special unit, and they told us if something were to occur, this squadron would be the first to be hit. Well, that sort of chilled me a little bit, which sent my thinking into something about eternity. If I were to die, what would happen? At that time, one of my close associates, friends, became a Christian. And I saw his life change totally. And I didn't like the change that occurred to him. So he said, well, I trusted Christ as my Savior, and I have no fear of dying. And he said, you can have the same change, and this is what you have to do. You're a sinner. You have to accept Jesus Christ as your personal Savior. He died for you, and he was buried, and he rose again the third day. I said, I'm going to try it just to see if it works. So that night, I got on my knees before my bunk, before I got into bed, and I confessed to the Lord that I was a sinner and I needed his help, forgiveness of sins. So there I accepted Jesus Christ as my personal Savior. And my life, my thinking, my inside of me totally changed. I was a different person altogether.
When he got out of the Air Force, he came back to his hometown and we met at the same church. And we were married on Thanksgiving.
I got a personal letter from Bob Jones, and it said, we would like you to come and study here if you're going to be a missionary. So we moved to South Carolina, and I started to BJU. My thought was going back to Japan as a missionary. We came to Japan with that in mind to become a church planter. At that time, tent work was one of the avenues of doing evangelism. Set up a tent on a vacant lot and then going out into the community with tracts and with announcements of the meeting. So we, at the tent, showed some Christian films, and then, of course, a good evangelistic message was given, and we saw people saved until television and before the electronics became popular, which of course then decreased the tent meeting. At the very end of it, we didn't have too many people attending the tent meetings. Then I began to wonder, Lord, what is the best way to reach the Japanese with the gospel? And so we thought probably the best way would be going house to house and distributing, putting gospel literatures into the mailboxes. And that's what our ministry turned into that. Of course, we continued our church planting. People who got saved, we invited them to church, and some of them were baptized. Some of them joined the church. But we continued our house-to-house tract distribution, which we are doing even today. But I go back to the basic idea of the Great Commission: go into all the world and preach the gospel. And knowing that a person cannot be saved without knowing or understanding the gospel, this became priority in my own thinking, in my own life, was getting the gospel into the people's hands and homes and into their hearts more than anything else.